Chad Kelly has had one of the most unique and crazy college football journeys that we have ever seen, and I feel like people only remember him as a random Ole Miss quarterback. But in the grand scheme of his college football journey, although he was an Ole Miss quarterback, he was many more things as well. From being first team All SEC to becoming Mr. Irrelevant, I'm pretty sure Chad has jumped through about every hoop that you can as a football player. In this video, we take a deep dive into the life and football journey of Chad Kelly. Guys, if you like the video, please like and share it, as that helps the channel to grow. Now let's get into the video. So Chad is actually the nephew of an all-time great that played for the Buffalo Bills, Jim Kelly. And as cool as that might seem at first, a coach once said about Chad that the name actually made things harder for him because it raised expectations that other people had for him. Nonetheless, he still did amazing in high school and got his name on the radar. He attended St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute in Tonawanda, New York, and in his junior season he threw for 2,159 yards and 24 touchdowns. And added to that with another 1,059 rushing yards and another 15 touchdowns. As great of a year that was, he stepped it up the next season with 3,050 passing yards and 27 touchdowns, and added to that with 991 rushing yards and an extra 14 touchdowns. So in short, it was a great high school career for Chad Kelly, and at this point in his life, the sky was the limit. He ended up becoming a 4-star QB and was the 5th ranked dual threat in the entire country. He received offers from schools such as Buffalo, Alabama, and Florida State, but he decided to commit to Clemson University. He redshirted his first season at Clemson in 2012, but in 2013 he appeared in 5 games and just had 58 passing yards along with 117 rushing yards and a touchdown. However, little playing time would be the least of Chad's problems because unfortunately in that same year he was dismissed from the team. Now we know the reason he was dismissed was disciplinary, but in terms of what exactly happened, that is still unknown. A direct quote from Dabo Swinney is he had a pattern of behavior that was not consistent with our program. So it could have been one big thing, or my guess is that it was a bunch of small things that ultimately led to this. Regardless of what he did, the consequence was still the same, and at the end of the day, Chad Kelly had been dismissed from the football program that he had committed to just 2 years prior. But one thing you will learn about the man is that although he makes bad decisions from time to time, he will never give up. So with basically no film or stats for Chad to share with other colleges, it left him with very few options on where to go next. But he ultimately decided to take a chance by going the JUCO route and attending East Mississippi Community College, yes, the same school from Last Chance U. The decision ended up working out really well for him because at EMCC he played amazing. In 12 games, the dude threw for 3,906 yards and 47 touchdowns. And to add to that, he led that team to become the 2014 JUCO National Champions. So although it was unfortunate that Chad had been dismissed from Clemson, the decision to go to EMCC couldn't have worked out better for him. His performance ended up earning him a scholarship to Ole Miss, so that's where he decided to go. Like the decision to go to EMCC, going to Ole Miss worked out very well for Chad. The minute he stepped into Hugh Freeze's offense, he went to work and did not look back. With Laquan Treadwell being his main target, he racked up over 4,000 passing yards and over 30 passing touchdowns in his junior season. And although he would have a great year statistically, Ole Miss's season as a team had its ups and downs. To start, in the third game of the season, 15th ranked Ole Miss faced 2nd ranked Alabama. And in a game that had one of the craziest plays I've ever seen, Ole Miss came out on top 43-37. Now, because I'm an Alabama fan, I remember this game very vividly, and it sucked to lose that game. And you can say what you want because I don't have a lot to complain about as an Alabama fan, but when your team loses the way Alabama did that day, it's always hard for the fans. Moving on, Ole Miss was on top of the world at this point and moved all the way up to number 3 in the rankings. However, just 2 weeks later, they faced the 25th ranked Florida Gators in Gainesville and ended up losing that game 38-10. This loss definitely hurt, but it didn't mean that their season was over. Plenty of teams have lost a single game early in their season and have still competed for a national championship, so Ole Miss still had hope at this point in the season. But sadly, all hope was lost in the 7th game of the season when they faced an unranked Memphis team. And I don't know why, but for some reason Ole Miss just didn't come to play that day and ended up losing to Memphis 37-24. Like I said, I don't know how this game turned out the way it did, but my guess is that Ole Miss came into that game like thinking they had already had the win, so they just didn't play up to their standards thinking it would be enough to win the game, but they ended up losing. Regardless of what happened that day, the reality is that they had lost and now could do nothing more than move on and focus on the rest of their season. Because of this loss, Ole Miss was moved all the way down to 24 in the rankings, and their hopes of a national championship were completely gone at this point. A week later, they played the 15th ranked Texas A&M Aggies and ended up beating them 23-3. This victory was a great way to bounce back from the loss a week prior, but I'm also willing to bet that it left fans a little confused. Like, I guess our team is capable of beating a pretty good Texas A&M team, but we can't even beat Memphis. Looking at the rest of their season, the only other loss they had was to Arkansas in one of the best games of the year. In a game that featured an incredible amount of offense, Arkansas ended up beating Ole Miss in overtime by 1 point. So a crushing loss to say the least, but they gave a great effort. After that, they finished the season with a 3-game winning streak. They beat 2 ranked SEC teams and topped it off with a Sugar Bowl victory against Oklahoma State. So going back to Chad Kelly, although this year had its ups and downs, it was still a great season for the team and an even better one for him. He ended up becoming a finalist for the Manning Award, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, as well as becoming second team All-SEC. The next year, Chad would have some success, but not as much as the previous year. He ended up having 2,758 passing yards and 19 touchdowns. Again, not the best season, but it wasn't horrible. The real problem lied with his team, who had nowhere near the year that they had the year prior. First off, they started the season against a 4th-ranked Florida State team and ended up losing that game 34-45. A well-fought game, but Florida State was ranked higher and they showed why. The next loss they had was to a number 1 ranked Alabama team, and the game was actually very similar to a year prior and honestly could have gone either way. But unfortunately for Chad and Ole Miss, they would end up losing 43-48. The next week they played a really good 12th ranked Georgia team and ended up winning that game 45-14. This was a great victory, but also a great way to bounce back from the tough loss against Alabama a week prior. From that game, they would end up beating Memphis, who they had lost to the previous year, and then lost almost every single game after that. They lost to Arkansas, LSU, and Auburn back to back, who were all ranked at the time. Then after that, they won 2 games in a row, one of which was against a 10th ranked Texas A&M team, so that was a really good victory. Then in the last 2 games of their season, they ended up losing to Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. And dude, to come 5 points short of beating the number 1 team in the entire country and losing to Vandy in the same season is not a good look. Regardless of that, they ended the year 5-7, so they weren't even bowl eligible. So in all, a pretty bad year for Ole Miss and an average year for Chad. So after that year, he declared for the 2017 NFL Draft. But before the draft, he had to prepare for the NFL Combine. Unfortunately for Chad, although he had received a Combine invite earlier in 2017, the NFL just took his invite away 2 weeks before the Combine. The reason they did this was apparently because of his past troubles. Specifically 2 incidents, one of which was what I talked about earlier, when he was dismissed from Clemson because of his behavior, and the second being a bar fight he got into in Buffalo, New York, 3 years prior to this Combine. So in 2014 is when it happened. So both of these happened 3 years prior to the Combine that Chad was now not allowed to attend. And as you would imagine, this made Chad pretty upset, and he kind of went on a little Twitter rant about it. But I'm totally with him because I'd be just as upset. Imagine you made a bad mistake or bad decisions at one point in your life and realize you need to change. So you do change and are on the right path for 3 years, and then those mistakes come back to hurt you. Like, Chad was a freshman in college when he made those mistakes, so of course he's going to make bad mistakes or have behavior problems as a freshman in college. But the thing is, he saw he needed to change, and he did, and played 3 great years of college football. And now the Combine invite that he rightfully earned was being taken away because of something he did as a freshman in college. Regardless of this, he was still picked in the draft, albeit as Mr. Irrelevant. Yes, the Broncos selected him with the very last pick in the whole draft. So after he was drafted, nothing really came out of his NFL career because something bigger got in the way of it. Just over a year after Chad had been drafted, he was unfortunately arrested. The reason he was arrested was because he allegedly broke into a stranger's home and just sat down on their couch and started mumbling to himself incoherently. Now, he didn't come into the house and try and hide or do anything crazy. He literally just came into the house and sat next to a mother and her child on their living room couch. Now, this is the kind of crime that makes me question the criminal's mental state. He didn't go for money, he didn't try and hurt anyone. From what I read, he literally just went into the house and sat down. So if he really did nothing, then that leads me to believe that the problem is he just isn't there mentally. So he got released the next morning after he got arrested, but not without posting a $2,500 bail first. After all this had gone down, as most of y'all would have guessed, the Broncos did release him. So they released him in October of 2018, and then in May of 2019, the next year, he signed with the Colts. He spent the whole 2019 season with the Colts, with some of his time being on the active roster and some of it on the practice squad. He didn't really do much for the Colts at all. In fact, he did so little that I couldn't even find any stats for him. Then in 2020, he started the year with the Colts, but was released in September of the 2020 season. This all brings us to what Chad is currently doing, which is playing in the CFL. In February of 2022, he signed with the Toronto Argonauts and became a backup QB. And in the 2022 season, he only completed 2 passes for 26 yards. So as we take a step back and look at Chad Kelly's life in whole, what we can see is a talented athlete who let his bad decisions and bad behavior get in the way of a successful football career. At his best, he was throwing for over 4,000 yards and 30+ touchdowns in the SEC. So we knew what he was capable of and what could have been. There's a lot of ways to look at his situation, but ultimately what it boils down to is a player who couldn't control his decisions and behavior enough to continue his NFL career. Right now, he's trying his best to carve out a career in the CFL, and I really hope that things work out for him. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please like and share the video, as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.